Can you say hard hats, folks? Hard hats, lunch pails, steel-toe boots?
Anything short of a championship this year is a failure. Look at this boomer right here.
You've just got so much talent here.
Somebody said we need to apologize for Jalen.
Can I close it, John? What are we apologizing for? What did we say? What did we do? Hey, Barry Manning here. Welcome to the Garden Report. Celtics, Nuggets, Abu Dhabi trip complete. And the Celtics take both games, this one in dominant fashion, 130 to 104. Noah Dalzell here. John Zanis out doing Patriots stuff today. I think Jimmy's out singing, enjoying his Sunday, so we'll hold it down. And talk about a pretty dominant win, a good start to this season, this preseason, at the very least for Boston here. In form, I know Noah tweeted at one point, not looking like much of a hangover here, at least to start these games. Denver, an interesting opponent. You get some great frontline competition at the beginning of these games, and both starters, for the most part, began these games. Al Horford sat out again today, so Luke Cornett got some extra run. So you take a little bit from that. I do think the second unit minutes here are trickier to talk about because I just don't like that Nuggets second unit. They got some things that might be going for them there. I think Russ sat this one out too, so you didn't even have that going for them there. But we'll get into that all. Some news, not a ton of news around the league right now. So we'll mostly be talking this game, both games as a whole. Celtics going to be coming back today and get into some practice before a couple more preseason games next weekend. So let's start. It is Sunday, so it's a great time to go over to Prize Picks. You got about 20 minutes to build your fantasy team for today. Great slate of football games, including the Patriots, who maybe don't have many guys you'd be looking at here unless you want to go under, because that offense, the offense that them in Miami will be putting out there as a whole will be pretty abysmal. But the best part about this, you know, McCaffrey's down. Other guys are down right now who you probably made central to your year-long fantasy teams. But with Prize Picks, you're only committed for a week. And that's the best part. You can build your team, 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projections for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Just a great overall experience over there. And you can download the app today and get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Just use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly over there. The best way to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. It's Prize Picks. Just a great experience over there. And the injury insurance, the best part as well. You can keep your guys in play for the second half, even if they go down in the first. So again, Prize Picks, code CLNS, run your game. So let's get into it. Noah, what stood out to you first and foremost from this one today?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody missed a beat, really. That's my main observation. It was just very obvious from the jump that there wasn't like a preseason vibe on the Celtics end. I do think you're right. The Nuggets second unit is pretty abysmal right now, and that third quarter was kind of tough to watch if you're watching from a Nuggets lens. But yeah, Jaylen Brown, I think, is the first guy I'll mention. He just looked great across the board. He looks like he continues to make steps and involve his game. And, obviously nobody put up crazy numbers just playing, 23 minutes or so, but he really stood out. I think he's going to have a great year. We've been thinking that. We've been hearing how much he's been working on his game. And tonight, I think you saw, or this morning, I should say, I think you saw quite a bit of that come together. I thought Tatum's shot looked a little bit, he continues to look smoother. Again, I'm not going to dive into the mechanical side, but, he hit 3 of 7. He didn't look to be hesitating. He looked pretty comfortable. And then obviously you have to shout out Sam Hauser and Peyton Pritchard off the bench. Again, I think they remain underrated as a duo, particularly how well they play together. Both were super efficient. Hauser was 6 of 7. Pritchard was 5 of 7. Made the most of their 16 minutes on the court. So those two guys, I think, are going to be really huge to what the Celtics hope to do this year, particularly when considering rest and those kinds of things. I think they're going to continue to have a larger load on their plate. So those are the first 4 guys that come to mind, but really a lot to like, I think, if you're watching this from a Celtics lens. Just a lot of guys stepping up, a lot of guys doing good things. And it is a weird watch, just every quarter having a completely different unit out there. But I thought that each unit, there was things to like.
Yeah, we can start with Tatum again. Another good performance from three here from him. Shot looking condensed, smooth, faster. No doubt about it. It's not a drastic change by any means, as we've talked about from the start, but just a little bit more to the point. And he's gotten some good results out of it in a variety of different scenarios. The pull up situations look better for him. Step back, he got one of those to go early in that first game. And then even just on some of those toss plays, catching the ball off a handoff or whatever it might be there, looking pretty good in the catch and shoot scenarios. I like him out of the corner too. They'll give it to him there and he can attack a closeout with a little more space or pass out of there. So as much as we talk about the mechanics with him right now, and there obviously is a difference there, the approach to me is important as well. And he comes out of these two games, 3 of 7 today, 3 of 7 in the first game, so 6 of 14. That's pretty good, just over 40%. And from the field, 40%, which you probably want to see a little higher, especially some of the plays around the rim. But overall, I like the approach here. I like the balance. You know he's going to be shooting a lot of threes. That's going to be his role within this offense. But for me, looking back at last year, mechanics, obviously a little bit of an issue, but it's also the shot attempts, getting rid of the most difficult versions. And it's great, as I said during the game, he and Brown, the biggest praise you hear of these guys around the league is just how great they are at making difficult shots. But sometimes I think they can make it a little easier on these guys too. And in Tatum's case in particular, getting him off the ball a little bit more, getting him closer to the basket a little bit more. He's obviously going to be the guy who puts up many of their threes, and they shot a ton again in this one, love it or hate it. He's got a good balance that we saw in these games here, which I found encouraging.
Yeah, Celtics were 18 of 47 from three, 38%. Nuggets were 8 of 34, 23%. So you gotta like that. I feel like they continue to showcase why the 3-point heavy offense works. Even when people aren't necessarily on fire, like it's hard to go up against. And they do have so many weapons. And Sam Hazard came in, didn't even hit the rim for the first few, so that certainly helped. But yeah, I thought just in general, we only saw it's only a couple quarters of action, but Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum both looked super locked into me. And you never know how people are your stars are gonna look in preseason action, but we've been hearing all the right things. Everybody's been saying the right things, and felt like this was they took it as seriously as you possibly can, all things considered. Derek White's diving on the floor. Jaylen Brown's getting a technical, doing the too little on Jamal Murray. So, as much as they could, I think it had a regular season feel when those guys were out there, and then it died down a little bit as you kind of continued running through the rotation. But yeah, I thought it was encouraging to see just them being the head of the snake. And then obviously the whole starting lineup I thought looked good. I like Luke with the starters. I don't mind it. I don't think you lose as much as you might think on paper. I mean, obviously it's not a long-term solution, but I feel like for what it is right now, it was pretty worthwhile. And I like that Al Horford sat these 2 games. He doesn't need these 2 games for rhythm. He needs to save his leg. So probably a good choice there by the coaching staff.
Yeah, I wonder where he's at. Definitely be interesting to hear more about that this week. I probably wouldn't have predicted him to play 0 across these 2 games. So is he not quite there yet conditioning wise? Do they feel like he needs to start this year a little more slowly? I do think there's a story there one way or another. I don't think he's hurt or dealing with
Yeah.
anything. So we'll see what happens when they come back to practice this week. Horford did not play in either of these games, as Noah mentioned there. Cornette, the beneficiary. And this gets me so excited, his start to this game. The movement, the screening, again, all the things I've talked about for years with him, the things that don't show up in this box score right here. You saw it all, and they're so concerted about playing through him, getting him touches closer to the net, having him do those kickouts. He had a kickout, I think, to Springer at one point that he missed in the corner. That was just a nice, pretty play off a touch inside. And even at times in this game, trying to finish inside, he beat Jokic on a slip at one point and finished past him. And I think some encouraging stuff defensively from him in these games, being able to get out on the perimeter a little bit more with guys and show against some actions, being able to deflect some passes inside. There was a play in that first game that I posted where he recovered on a pick and roll, tipped it away, almost like Giannis in there. This guy looks like he's ready to take another step. And it's so exciting to me because you are going to have nights during this regular season with Porzingis out where he might have to step into the starting lineup. And like you mentioned, he doesn't look out of place out there. He actually looks like a guy who enhances this unit with his screening, which is so good, his passing, which is underrated, and even a little bit more offensive rebounding than we've seen from him in the past.
Yeah, definitely. And then again, Xavier Tillman too, like thought he looked good and thought that there was a lot of flashes, a lot of things to like in his game as well. He played 15 minutes, they played around the same. So, I think you have to feel good about both of those guys heading into the regular season. I think the question is how do they translate to the playoffs and who do you trust in
Right.
those moments? And we've seen them both have flashes, but from a regular season standpoint, as far as like, I know the big question is what's going to happen in Kristaps Porzingis' absence through December. Like, I think you got to feel good about those two guys splitting those minutes quite a bit. So I think that there's a lot to like there, and I like, and I like the idea of them kind of each offering the things that they are good at. I think Tillman's shot has looked smooth. He was 1 of 2 today. I think he hit one the other day. So, yeah. And then Keita was the other guy. I still feel like he makes some defensive mistakes where it's like he does have the tools. Like you almost need to put someone else's brain in his body, and I feel like he's just going to be there. But I still feel like he's a step behind them defensively as far as just knowing where to be. There were a couple times today. I mean, he was up against Jokic for a while, so it's like you can't really blame him for things going wrong. But I still think he's a little bit behind those two as far as faith and him being able to be kind of an impactful part of the rotation. But I'm watching those three quite a bit because that's just going to be like that's a rotation spot that we know that there's going to be available minutes. Whereas these perimeter players, like I'm high on some of them and I'm excited about them, but we don't know what the opportunity is going to look like.
Yeah, I feel similar about that. They went to Keita first today, so I thought you might see Tillman take a seat. That's good that he got in there today because I would have been saying, "Oh, is the knee not reacting well again?" And they got to get him some rest there. So that was just a rotation or lineup choice, I guess, going with Keita first. The one thing that does encourage me with Keita, or I guess there's two things. We've heard his name mentioned among the guys who are going to be in that mix at center, so I don't think he's boxed out or there's a lack of trust with him right now. In fact, I think it's the opposite. They're trying to put him in positions to succeed on that end, knowing that he's not the best rim protector straight up. I don't think he's a guy who's going to be blocking 2 shots a game, disrupting shots, or making consistent contests in there the way Cornet and some others are at that spot. I think for him, it's more about utilizing his athleticism. They had him off ball quite a bit in this game, like they did in the summer league, trying to roam. And I think it's just a timing thing for him right there. I think he's got the capability to be good in that role, and it's just not clicking yet. Switching's another matter. I don't know if you want him switching a ton on defense, and that's where Tillman obviously has a big advantage on him.
Yeah.
He's capable of it, but they've put him in that position a lot in these games, and even they did some like Tillman Keita stuff too, where Keita was dropping back and Tillman was on the perimeter, and they'd have Tillman running around a lot trying to go at him in those situations. I don't think Keita backed him up the best there. So there's obviously some room for improvement on the defense here. And another thing I noticed in this game, maybe it was just a matter of Nuggets missing a lot of shots and different lineups for Boston and not being super connected, but the Nuggets were pretty good on the offensive glass in this game. It didn't hurt Boston. Celtics still shot a lot more shots overall. 3-point advantage, still a big edge for them here. And the Nuggets turned it over like crazy too, which is how this got out of hand. But I do think the Celtics looked, I was going to pick out one weakness here for them with these centers, with these lineups, they look a little vulnerable on the offensive glass for the other team, the defensive glass, I should say. Saric beat them a little bit in there. Jokic tough. Wings getting past guys. I think that did hurt them a little bit here in these 2 games. And Cornet's not the best defensive rebounder. Tillman a little undersized out there. Keita can help, which is another reason I think Keita will get some opportunities here in the schedule early on. But if I was going to pick one nitpick for all the center optimism we have here, is that they do look a little weak on the boards without Horford and Porzingis.
Yeah, and with Tatum playing half the game, that was
Right.
another thing. I think
he's everything, right? When you're a little smaller.
Yeah, and again, like we talk about this a lot, but it's one of the things that's underrated is his rebounding, and ultimately, like 25 minutes tonight, you didn't have Al, Porzingis, or Tatum on the floor, and so that's going to put you at a disadvantage. And you want to see those guys. I think it's a group effort. Just looking at the box score, like some of the, Jalen had 1 rebound. Derek had 5, Drew had 3. So nobody was like really, I don't think it was a point of emphasis, but I'm not overly concerned about it because I think when you do have this roster with Al and Tatum playing at full strength, like in the playoffs, like I don't think rebounding was really much of an issue. But yeah, certainly it's something you want to keep your eye on, especially when you're playing against teams that have known great offensive rebounders, which there will be some of those teams, whether it's OKC with Isaiah Hartenstein, Mitchell Robinson if he's healthy. God, those 2 guys aren't on the same team anymore, but there's some teams where you definitely have to keep your eye on it. But I feel like when Tatum comes off the floor, like rebounding complexion really changes. But
It does.
yeah, certainly this was a game though. I will say across the board, like depth looked like a big strength of this team, and the Nuggets are kind of on the opposite end of the scale where they're notoriously kind of struggling on that department. But just looking at the guys that continue to have checking in, like you have to feel good about who they have backing up this really elite starting group. That's my perspective on it, at least.
Yeah, one of my preseason questions: can Pritchard repeat what he did last year? It looks like he can.
He's going to elevate it.
Looks like he can. Yeah. Hauser, who missed shots in the first game, made them in this one and extended that dominance of the second unit. So those 3 guys, it's going to be the core of the bench again when they're healthy. All these other guys we're talking about aren't going to play, Tillman, Springer, Walsh, whoever, when they're fully healthy. And that's essentially your 8 right there. And if those 3 guys are clicking, connected, complementing what the starters do, you're looking at a team that's going to roll at a similar pace to what they did last year. And the big thing, as you see in a game like this, is they're able to step into bigger roles and sustain what the team's doing here. Al being out, this is what your rotation looks like. And you're going to have different lineups, different combinations that are still able to play pretty well together. So that was a huge strength of them last year. Probably the biggest reason that they won the East by like 14 games or whatever it was.
Yeah, 14.
And when all these guys are back, you expect it to click a little bit. And the encouraging part, like you said, is that guys have taken steps. Pritchard's obviously leaner, in better shape, stronger. Those are things you want to see from him. Shot making, I know that's something that he wants to be better at this year. Cornette, similar deal, physically looking a little bit better, a little more poised out there, more connected. And Hauser, it's just pretty much do what you did last year. But though the rebounding for him with 8 in this one is a real area of growth for him too. So
Team high.
Exciting stuff from those 3 guys.
Yeah, for sure. And again, thinking about shot creation, like with Porzingis out in particular, like there's going to be times when you're actually going to want Hauser or Pritchard to create their own shot a little bit more than you did last year. And I think both of those 2 guys are guys that had really good seasons, and you'd probably just take them at face value and replicate them. But I also think they both have the potential to make a jump. And with Hauser, I think it's a little bit off the dribble stuff, a little bit beyond just the catch and shoot threes, which we know he's incredible at. Like I think there's a lot to like about Hauser's potential, and even just an up fake like drive or just here and there. We've seen like what Duncan Robinson's been able to add to his game, and not that they're the same player, but there are certainly flashes of like things that Hauser could incorporate. So I'm really high on both those guys. I think they play really well when they're playing together, especially. And at a certain point too, like not a lot of teams have the luxury of having 3 of their top bench players playing for several years together in the same system, with the same group. So I think that's going to come to benefit them too. A lot of times, like teams are losing those good bench players because they go sign bigger deals elsewhere. And this team was able to stick it out. So I think that's a big part of what's been really impressive for them.
Definitely. And that's a good point too here, going against Jokic. So that's the standard Cornet had to reach in these games as a starter, and did a pretty good job with it. And Jokic probably played at about half speed, but still, that's the best player in the world right there he's going up against. So super encouraging stuff from those 3. The depth contributions below them, a little more mixed. Keita, we mentioned him, still a ways to go in terms of picking up the defense, I think. In the mix, I think, squarely in terms of their depth right now. Al goes down, he's probably playing. They're going to some combinations with him and Tillman, so they're clearly looking to develop some double big chemistry out there again. But I do want to move on to Walsh, who I thought looked pretty good again here today. Not as good in the shooting department, missed all 3 threes, and that's another conversation here with him. But some nice plays in defensive coverage, good ball pressure. I feel like he's sticking with guys well on the ball. They're having him bring the ball up sometimes, which I find interesting. And then on offense, his only shot came as a screener and roller. Nice finish inside. I like where he's at right now. again, probably a good bet he's going to be in Maine this year. But he's showing a little something here in these couple games that he can play off the starters or whoever else is out there, the second unit mostly, where he's been, and can apply some pressure in the other areas of the game. Didn't get on the offensive glass in this game, but I just overall liked his activity and improvement over what we saw from him in the summer league. In fact, it makes me think that a lot of his summer league could be explained by him thinking he had to go out there and take a lot of shots and put up big numbers and be a frontline guy in that scenario. And that's not what they need him to do. They need him to do all the things we've seen from him in this environment. So I don't know, injuries, rest, things like that. I want to have some hope, and I know a lot of people in the chat do as well, that maybe he can sneak into some time. I just don't think this whole year can be another lost season where he's not lost season, but a season where he's in Maine the entire time and miles from even thinking about appearing in Boston. I think he, given his guaranteed contract, given his draft status, given where he is in his career at this point, should be a little bit more front of mind in terms of where he's at in his development. I think starting the year for him is a good idea in Maine, but if he shows some steps up there quickly, there's a spot for the taking here, I think, clearly with O'Shea gone in terms of that 10th, 11th man.
Yeah, so the thing with Jordan Walsh is I think people freaked out about his summer league performance, and it was uncalled for, and I tried to temper people at the time, but at the end of the day, this is not a guy that's really ever been I'm gonna go off for 25, like maybe in high school a bit, but he wasn't in college. He wasn't in Maine last year, and I think that he felt a lot of pressure. And he even said it when the first day we were in Vegas. He said like, "I'm gonna get in my bag a little bit, like with this is different than Maine. Like I'm gonna show what I can do." And then it didn't go well, and I think that then the anxiety and the pressure starts to mount, and you want to rectify all the misses with more. You're forcing more things, and we see it all the time in basketball. But it kind of piled on, and I think he got in his head, and he was frustrated, and it impacted his defense, but. I never thought that it was reflective of like what he is capable of. And the biggest thing that I liked out of his 2 summer league performances so far, I think he played, 13 minutes today, 25 on Friday. So a pretty sizable sample. He just looks like way more playing, under control and not forcing the issue. And part of it is because, he's playing on a stacked NBA team now and not on a summer league squad or in Maine or whatnot. But I think a lot of it is I'm sure the coaching staff has been talking to him. I'm sure he's been thinking about a summer league performance all summer. And he just looks a lot more poised. And from what I'm hearing and my understanding is the plan is still for him to be primarily in Maine this year. And even guys like Baylor Shireman are ahead of him as far as the rotation goes, as far as potential opportunities, although obviously that could change quick. But yeah, you might see him come down to Boston a little bit more, at least to, be available. He really wasn't available for much. There was one road trip last year that he was a part of, and towards the end of the season, he joined them a little bit. But yeah, I think Jordan is one of those guys. The fans are excited about him. I get it. Like he's one of those. I think somebody here has a comment that kind of captures it. Like if he gets it all together, I think that there's such a high ceiling there, and that's what people are excited about. But flashes of that certainly today, 2 steals, and it's just like under control. You just got to slow him down a little bit. And it was tough to watch in summer league, but I also think it's reflective of summer league being a really difficult environment for a lot of types of players. Like if you're not somebody whose game translates well, it can look disastrous. And I think he fell in that category.
Yeah, and I want to see some more. We're just talking about 2 games here with some of these guys and what they contribute. I just hope that if he's close, if he's on the edge, maybe you feel like there's some areas of his game that could fit in and others that worry you if you're Joe Mazzulla about keeping the system going and just having this team run smoothly throughout this regular season. I think that's a big component of why some guys will play and why other guys won't. Is I don't think Joe even wants one guy out there messing up what they're doing on either end of the floor. I think they just want to keep things in sync, which is great. And I think they have enough depth to do that. But as I've written a couple times this week, you do have to start to think ahead a little bit here, especially during this regular season where you want to get rest. You want to maybe take a step back in terms of how much you're playing guys and how much you're going for it. I don't think you need to win the East by 20 games this year. So it might benefit you, even if it knocks you back just a little bit, to get some of these guys in here, see what you have first and foremost, because you're going to have decisions on a lot of these guys at the end of the year and whether you want to keep developing them or not, and get them opportunities, reps to develop. And obviously the biggest reason Walsh was in Maine all of last year is so that he could play consistently. He didn't just end up stuck on the Celtics bench, because even if he was active and available and around the team last year, he probably would have played about as much as we saw him in Boston last year. None at all. So can you get him in a little bit? And this is where I go to shooting. Obviously, the biggest thing that's going to keep him off the floor is he's just not there as a shooter. And he might never be, given his pedigree. So is that just going to eliminate him from ever being part of this Celtics team? Or are there some other ways, creative ways you can work him in? I like that screen and roll situation he had got his basket in today. I like him playing around the basket a little bit. He's so long. It looks like he has great potential as an offensive rebounder out there. Cutting, all of those things. There's got to be a more creative way to use some of these guys, because if we're just thinking about the shooting now, he's not going to fit in. Springer's not going to fit in. You even wonder if Tillman's going to fit in. I know the early returns on it look good, but if he's going to be a 4 for them, I don't know if that's a good enough shooter to be fitting in at the 4. So I know they love their spacing. I know they want the floor clear for Tatum and Brown. I get all that. But if you're going to fit in some of these guys deeper on the roster, they're not Hauser, Pritchard type shooters. There's got to be some other ways to fit them in offensively. And that's not the reason I want Walsh to not be in this year. I want it to be maybe he's not caught up with the defense, or maybe he's just not physically there.
Yeah.
I don't want it to just be, oh, he can't shoot threes, he can't play.
Yeah, and I don't think that would be the reason, honestly. I think if everything else comes together, there's a role for him. I'm super curious. Like, I know a lot of these guys were talking about their three-point shooting, but really our knowledge of it is very limited sample size. Like, each of them took like 3 threes today, and then watching them
What was
warm
he in
up.
Maine last year? 33?
I don't remember. I think he was a little bit better than that.
35
Maine has
maybe.
35. Yeah, Maine has two seasons. There's like the exhibition round, and then there's the regular season. And so I think he got better in the second round of that Maine season. But the other thing is that the Celtics like team is constantly evaluating these guys' performances and doing like larger scale shooting, and they have all these advanced stats on them just like from training camp, from preseason. And I would love to see those, because I feel like I get a glimpse of like, okay, look, Luke looks good in warm ups shooting, but obviously his numbers aren't good enough across the board, or he'd be shooting them more. So I think, I'm curious where these guys stack up against one another, because Jordan Walsh, Jaden Springer, these are guys that there's a huge question mark around their ability to shoot. And right now, like, we don't really have the answers, because I can't conclude too much from watching a handful of shots. Like, Jaden didn't look like he was dying to shoot threes today, but I've seen him throw 25 in a row in warmups, but I don't know how much that means. So it'll be a big part of it. You don't see a lot of guards in the NBA today that get on the floor for extended minutes without being able to shoot. So I think it will keep people off the floor ultimately. Baylor Shireman, I thought, speaking of shooters, like, looked a little rushed. I got to get used to his left-handed shot. It looks so unnatural to me sometimes, the way he kind of wraps it around his body, but he made it work in college. I'm sure he'll make it work in the NBA. But yeah, they're all a question mark right now. And I think that maybe one of those guys will evaluate, kind of jump above the rest of the pack and maybe establish themselves as a good backup perimeter player. And again, I mentioned this last time, but a lot of it comes down to injuries. And if there's all of a sudden one of the stars misses 20 games, like, suddenly you're really getting a chance for some of these guys to show what they're capable of.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting where they stand going into the season. I understand wanting to get a look at them now where there's minutes available. I do find it interesting, maybe not telling, because I don't think preseason rotations and minutes always mean a ton, but it probably says a little something that they want to get a look at Springer and Walsh in particular with that second group and see how they fit in around some of the stars, staggering into those groups. And other guys further down the line didn't get an opportunity again today. Same exact statement that we saw in the first game in terms of where guys stand. So Peterson, Davison, Shireman, Walker, all those guys, Anton Watson on the back burner, and probably a good bet you'll see all those guys in Maine to start the year, at least right now, based on where they are in the rotation. So do these two join them? Do these two stay close and have status as next men up? We'll have to see next weekend when the Celtics play again here. I want to give a shout out to our other sponsor, Game Time. It's just about game time down in Foxborough. So this is the beauty of the app if you're in the area. Game's getting going right around now. The kickoff underway. You can still go on Game Time and see tickets And for whoever's selling them over there, they might just want to get them off their hands completely at this point. The game already started, and you're going to get the best deals at this time. That's the best part of using Game Time, is some of the best deals on tickets on the app come around or right after game time, and you can buy tickets right into the game on the Game Time app here. And right now you can use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase, whether it's Foxborough, whether it's some concerts coming up. I got a couple fun concerts I'm looking forward to, including Stevie Wonder this week, who's on tour, believe it or not. Great options across the board on the Game Time app. Go check it out. You can get views of your seats, panoramic views that show you exactly what you're going to be seeing from your seat, the best part of the app, in my opinion, as well as all-in pricing, so you know what you're going to be paying, and deals, flash deals, zone deals, stuff like that happening all the time on the Game Time app, making it the best experience for buying tickets. So use that code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Of course, terms apply. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. What time is it? Game time. So we can go a little deeper on the roster here. I think people, myself, a little disappointed in Shireman, where he's at right now. I expected a little bit more of a strong first impression from him, and instead we're seeing him a little lost, a little physically overrun by the game right now, and missing shots, which is something we saw from him in Summer League 2. And even though there's other parts of his game that can make up for it, and he did make a nice string of plays after some early misses here, rebound, pushing traffic, nice feeds to Keita inside. You got to hit shots if you're him to get on the floor. That's going to be his primary responsibility, and that's not there right now. Not much playing time, not many opportunities, so understandable in some way, but he's clearly on the back end of the roster right now in terms of trust. Lonnie Walker, I think you can already say he's probably main bound at this point. No emphasis in getting him opportunities with other guys in the rotation. He's missing shots, and the worst part with him is his approach isn't good. I think he's forcing shots. I think he's just trying to get opportunities out there quickly, and that's understandable because he's playing 6 minutes, but it's not going to put him in position to be part of this team to start the year, I would think. And we already had that conversation. Maybe he goes elsewhere. Maybe he stays in Maine for a month or two and tries to fit into what they're doing here system-wise, because from the little we've seen of him, just doesn't look like he's in sync with the passing, with plays that they want to run, with all the things that make the Celtics offense what it is. And I know a lot of people are excited about him. I understand it. Great pedigree, high draft pick, guy who's still young, has some potential here. But from what we've seen over 2 games is he's just not a priority for them. And he's going to have to stay dedicated to what they're doing here. And if he wants to go somewhere else and try something else, if opportunity arises, that's going to be on him. But through 2 games, it doesn't look like Walker's going to make this team.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I don't think anything about these 2 games plays too much of a role in his potential as far as making this roster. I think just hearing people talk about, from Brad to Joe to even Lonnie himself, like, it was quite clear that the plan, the expectation for him is not to be on this main in this official roster right away. And so, yeah, I mean, I can't even weigh in on a guy that played 6 minutes that's obviously trying to like make some sort of mark. Yeah, he didn't look natural. I thought a couple of the shots that he took were like he checked in immediately and wanted to get a good look in. But that's kind of like normal. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of human instinct, and you have to fight against it. But I'm just curious to see like what this main situation looks like for him. Is it going to be one of those things where he's just kind of establishes himself as a fabric of this team and shows that he can be a veteran presence, and maybe later on in the year someone snags him or the Celtics snag him? Like, I think this could go a lot of ways, but I'd be very surprised at this point if it's anything other than him going to Maine at the end of this preseason. And yeah, it would have been fun to see him more, just because we don't really need to see like Drew Holiday. Like, there's not really much to talk about there. So it would have been fun to see him more. But I thought from the stretch that he saw, like, he did look like to see that he was forcing the issue. And again, him, Shireman, some of those guys that checked in the fourth quarter, like, it's just, I can't even like weigh in on that because it's such an uncomfortable, awkward position to be in, and it's such a small sample size for us to microanalyze. But yeah, Lonnie looked like he was forcing it a bit.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating part too about them having to do the Abu Dhabi thing here. You miss out on a little practice time with the travel. you got this week off here. They're going to come back, probably have to recover for a handful of days, and then get into some practices that are a little more limited. I'd imagine going into a weekend back-to-back. So you're probably picking and choosing a little bit. Do you want to get more reps in practice? Obviously, that's the case now with Horford. Or do you want to get some game reps in? And I think that's been the case with these other guys. I was actually pretty surprised by how much we saw the starters in these games.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be like one rotation out and let all of these younger bench guys and depth pieces fill out those minutes. But they actually gave, I thought, a pretty good run of minutes, rotations, and sets out there. They really worked through some things with the starters in these two games. And maybe the NBA gave them a little nudge and was like, yeah, we gotta see Tatum and Brown more than 5 minutes in these Abu Dhabi games as we showcase the game here. Or maybe it's the Celtics saying, we don't have as much practice time this preseason as we probably normally would otherwise, so we actually have to get some reps in these games. And that's probably a big part of it here. So, yeah, there weren't as many minutes for the Shiremans and Walkers of the world because you were seeing Tatum, Brown, Holiday, and White for pretty much the whole first half. White played 22, Holiday 17 in this one, 23 each from Brown and Tatum. That's way more than I would have expected from them in these games.
Yeah, and you saw on the other side, like, a bunch of Nuggets players didn't play. Aaron Gordon didn't play. I think did Aaron Gordon play? No.
Westbrook was out.
Westbrook was out. So yeah, I think I'm not surprised. Everything we know about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown is that if they are given the opportunity to play, they will want to. And it sounds like, in particular, this trip and being in this part of the world meant a lot to Jaylen Brown. He told us at camp, he really wanted to play here, and he said it was a really special day and everything. So I'm not surprised that we saw them go out there. I'm sure if they had the chance to weigh in, that was the direction they wanted to head. But they only have 3 more preseason games. So over the next, regular season starts October 22nd. They have 2 at home, 1 on the road in Toronto. So maybe those games they'll play a little bit less. We'll see how that goes. But I feel like part of the vibe and the hype around this trip was having the opportunity for those guys to get more extended run in front of fans. And it sounds like there was a lot of Jaylen Brown fans chanting MVP for him, a lot of Tatum jerseys from Adam Himmelsbach's reporting. So it was fun to watch them play. I think they played the second half as serious as you could imagine. And then I would have liked, I think we talked about this last game, it would have been fun to see a little bit more mixing and matching. Let's see JD Davison not play with the main Celtics guys and play with the actual players that will be in Boston this year. Stuff like that would have just been fun to watch, but I'm sure there's a reason why they kept things kind of as close to who they'll actually be playing with in the next few weeks as well.
Yeah, and he had a couple shots too in 12 minutes in this one. I don't know how to feel about him. Springer's probably ahead of him. So you have 4 guards in front of him, and that probably puts him in Maine along with the 2-way deal here. And like we talked about with Walsh, is this just another year where he's up there all year, or is he going to start to break through and get some spot opportunities too? He's just in such a tough position with the guard depth in the organization, but it does feel like he's taken steps. A lot of positive reviews about his offseason workouts after the Summer League where he played pretty strong, and his first 2 appearances in the preseason, he looks in control. I don't think we talked enough about that great first game he had. Chase down block, alley-oop the other way. He's got such good feel over the game, and I know turnovers can be an issue at times. Smaller stature, you wonder how that's going to translate to the NBA, and the shot, such a big question, but obviously improved over the first year, certainly, and last year he wasn't great overall from 3 either, but he comes out and hits another 3 in this game. Is there any hope for him to play regular season NBA minutes this year?
Again, not to be a broken record, because I feel like we keep going back to the same points because they're so true, but if he can become a 3-point shooter, yes, I think that he's a really good playmaker. He's a good ball handler. He's a reliable point guard. He's a floor manager, and he had a very underrated season in Maine last year, in part because nobody really cares about the G League. And so nobody's giving a ton of, hype to any of these players. And also he's just not one of the guys that people are super closely following in Maine. But as someone knowing, I've watched Maine quite a bit last year, and I feel like JD Davison was consistently the best player on the floor, with prospects and guys that are going to be on real NBA deals this season also on the floor. And so there's a lot of things against him. The fact that he is on his 3rd 2-way contract in a row, the fact that he's undersized, that he's not a proven shooter. But there's also a reason why they keep him on board and why they keep him as a 2-way where they can give somebody else a look. I think that there's something in him that they believe in. And I know that he was looking for something more than a two-way this offseason. Like I'm sure he tried his best to get a guaranteed deal, and clearly didn't get that. But that doesn't reflect on his potential, because there's a lot of really good players that didn't get guaranteed deals this summer. So I don't know. I'm rooting for him. I feel like a broken record saying I'm rooting for everybody, but he's somebody that you can just steadily see how he's improved over his 2 seasons in Maine, and that's all you can really ask for. And he's a leader. He's been a leader of that team. He has a really good attitude from everything I've heard. So it'd be fun to see. Again, I think a lot of these guys, we're talking so deep in the rotation, the only chance that he's going to have is if there's some injury trouble and all of a sudden Pritchard's a starting point guard for a while and they bring in JD as a backup. Like that's really the only pathway I see for him in Boston right now. And so you don't hope for it, but you also recognize that if something does happen, providing that it's like temporary, that there's on the bright side, like maybe you get an opportunity with some of these players.
Do you know the Luke Lemon Square story?
No, I think I do actually. Was this like you made a joke on the Garden Report about how like you were describing the atmosphere in the locker room or something?
Yeah. It was 2 years ago. I think Missoula's first season. They went up by 1 million on the Nets at a home game, and you felt like it was going to be one of those games last year where you just kick your feet back and it was going to be like a nothing second half. And
I
they
remember
gave
that
a blow
game.
run before halftime, completely blew it in the second half, and it went the other way, and the Nets ended up blowing them out. And we go in the locker room after, and everyone's completely silent. It was one of those games, and there was a tray of lemon squares or dessert. John and them called them lemon squares. I don't know what they were. And
But
no
only you
one's
were in the
touching
locker room,
them.
right?
Yeah. So no one's touching them. And I forget who told me, it might have been Taylor or something, that Luke made them. He brought them in, was going to serve them to the team after the game. No one's eating them. And then Mike Muscala came over and was like, ate one and was like, all right. But he had this whole tray of desserts there. They blew a 25-point lead, maybe 28, and no one touched them after the game. So I went on
The
the
reason
show
I know
after.
this. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I went on the show after, and they were asking for the moon in the locker room, and I was like, no one touched Luke's squares.
So I was actually looking for a video the other day because I was trying to find something that we were talking about. So I searched looking for a different video, and then I came across that Lemon Squares video, and I was like, let me watch this. So I actually watched that clip like a week ago by chance. So I'm up to speed on the lore, but that's pretty funny. I remember that game. I mean, I wasn't covering the team then, but I remember being like, I checked the box score, and then like 2 quarters later, it was like flipped. So not surprised that bad vibes followed after that one.
Yeah,
But
you
thank you
started
for
covering the team after
yeah.
3 years of nightmares.
I brought the good luck.
We went through
I know
it.
that's why I'm so optimistic. You know, I've never seen anything go wrong. So and I was
Yeah,
vindicated last year.
we saw a lot go wrong over 3 years, and it's amazing to think, given where they were in 2021 in particular, that they're in this position as such an overwhelming favorite this year coming off a championship. And before we get out of here, I think that's all from this game here. Celtics beat the Nuggets 130-104. Pretty dominant effort. Starters look good. Bench guys ahead of schedule, I would say. Let's get to some news around the league. Not great news for some former Celtics. Marcus Smart, Grizzlies getting underway. There was a Smart report out there about Knicks interest or something like that. I don't know the source, and I don't want to downplay it, but I don't understand why everyone ran with that. Was that like you taking some stock in that? Knicks Smart?
I mean, I think the report was that they're internally talking about him. I'm sure there's a lot of teams that are. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was one of their reputable beat writers that reported it. So I don't think that he would go out on a limb and say something if he didn't have real sources. But I don't know. I think it'd be fun to see him there from a basketball standpoint. I understand Celtics fans were not happy to hear about that report. He probably won't end up there, but I also think that he's not a perfect fit in Memphis when you look at that starting lineup. So I don't know. I could see them trading him somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised if he's not a guy that sticks long term.
It's a good point. I don't know what to expect from them. I know I heard Drew on the broadcast and Noah Eagle, who when he came on here was super high on them. A lot of people nationally high on the Grizzlies' health, restored, Ja back to start this year, obviously suspended to start last year and then hurt. I understand the hype, but to me, they're the hardest team in the league to anticipate. You don't know how Smart fits in because he barely played last year. Clark's
Yeah.
coming back off a torn Achilles. Jaren Jackson got hurt. I think he's down a couple weeks, and they're going to take it slowly with a hamstring injury. And G.G. Jackson and Vince Williams went down with pretty significant injuries already there. So injuries already setting in on a team that was just torn apart by them last year. So if you were going to say the single biggest team that's hardest to predict this year for me, it's Memphis. And in that West, if things don't go right or more injuries strike, they're playing, maybe not even playoffs. And then you're talking about a Smart trade. Is he in the last year of his deal, I want to say? Or maybe
he
2
might
more?
be, yeah.
Yeah, so he's in an interesting
this is
spot
mine.
with them.
Yeah. They are. I totally agree with you. I think that
He has 2 years
Memphis
left.
Okay. Damn, so when they traded him, he had 3 guaranteed years left on that deal.
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense. Yeah, so I don't know. I think he's in a weird spot. Memphis is in a weird spot. I just want to see them stay healthy because I feel like every time I get like an underdog NBA notification, it's another Memphis player straining something. So
Yeah.
I'm not super high on them in like a contender way. I don't know that they have like the ability to go from like a Timberwolves or an OKC style jump where they go from lower in the standings to now a contender, but I think they'll definitely be better. He's just a little bit of a weird fit there. Like he's a weird fit alongside Desmond Bane and John Morant. Like those 3 together on the floor at once, a little bit undersized. I think a lot of why they brought him was to help out when Ja was going to be out, and then that didn't really work out because Ja missed the whole year and Smart missed most of the year. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I would love to see him somewhere. As a fan of his, I'd love to see him somewhere where he can contend for a championship. I know it would hurt people to see him in the East or see him go against the Celtics. But I think that it'd be fun to watch. So we'll see. I don't think that report was super substantive, but I also think that there's been rumblings about him not staying in Memphis through the duration of that contract. So
yeah, and I don't know what the Knicks can offer. They'll float Mitchell, I'm sure. Robinson. I don't know how valuable he is while he's hurt. Even after, if he comes back and plays decently, I don't know how valuable he is. They don't have a ton of contracts to move. Pretty restricted money-wise, so it'll be a difficult trade to make for New York. And then the other 2 guys who went out the door last season in trades already hurt after pretty injury-plagued seasons last year. For Rob, who I guess went through 1 practice, responded well, then went through the second and had some pain and had to come out, and now he's out at least 2 weeks with a hamstring injury. Brogdon, I don't know the extent of his. He's going to get some MRIs, but I guess hurt his hand in practice, so more of a freak injury in his case, but he missed all but 39 games last year, I want to say. So 2 guys, injury-plagued, and departed Boston in a weird way after that 2023 season, and obviously the Celtics made off with Holiday, and what's going to go down as an all-time trade. Tough to see these guys in the spots there. Brogdon, of course, ending up in Washington, which is probably going to be the worst team in the league this year, and already hurt. He's in the last year of his deal, so I don't know what the future holds for him, but he was the 6th man of the year 2 years ago, and now in relative obscurity out there, Rob was a legitimate defensive player of the year candidate 2 years ago, and is probably the 3rd string afterthought center in Portland right now, struggling to get on the floor, period. So tough news for both of these guys.
yeah, I mean, the Malcolm Brogdon stuff is so wild because the kind of injuries that he has is always something different. It's always like a hand or an elbow or like, I don't know. I don't get why it happens. At a certain point, it's like, I get the knee guys. I get the 7-footers that keep having lower leg injuries, but does he just have bad luck? Like, I don't understand why he keeps finding himself in this position, but certainly that trade was a win as soon as they became contenders and as soon as they won the championship. Like, they won the championship, you can't complain about the trade, but I think now seeing what those guys have done since leaving Boston, like this is a pretty wild, pretty lopsided result between Rob Williams, who, again, I hope the hamstring thing is a limited thing. And I hope that it's just one of those, he comes back from training camp and he's ramping things up and it's not a long-term thing, but it's certainly not a good start. And then Brogdon, he's one of those guys I don't have a lot of faith to stay healthy. So it's tough. And then even Marcus Smart missed most of last year. So all 3 guys that they lost might have been a wash last year anyways. And some of it's out of their control, but there's certainly a history there and a track record where it's not totally unexpected. But yeah, just saw that Brogdon report and That sucks. And being in Washington sucks too. He always has like the good lines is when he's on these bad teams, like how he said he always wanted to be a Wizard because he had like family in DC growing up. Same with Portland. Like I think he said the right things, but at this point in his career, I'm sure he wants to play for a contender.
Yeah, and you wonder how much contenders want him at this point. The defense didn't go the way you thought it might in Boston. That probably didn't help his value, and then the injuries. It's tough to try to go after a guy who's making like $22 million if you're not sure he's going to be on the court. But he's a good candidate to move if he can get healthy this year. And Rob, plenty of rumors all over the summer about him moving, given that they drafted Klingon. So once he shows he can be healthy, maybe he ends up elsewhere as a depth center. And there's certainly a need around the league. I thought New Orleans might be a fit next to Tice. They don't have much center depth. And there's some other teams around the league that probably need some help there. Not the Knicks anymore, of course, who I think are going to debut Towns today. So that'll be interesting to watch as well as they get their preseason action started. Only other thing I'll say here, we just passed the 1-year anniversary of the holiday trade right before camp. And it just makes me think again, if Brogdon goes down or struggles to stay available, and some of it was that elbow injury from the East Finals the year before that kept him out with Portland. And then you think of Rob going down for the year after 5 games. We had so much debate at that time. Oh, do you trade Rob? Do you give up on his potential? Do you trade all these picks? Do you do the Holiday deal? And looking back on it, obviously Holiday's addition meant everything and added to this group. And like I've said, actually was the piece that changed everything. Porzingis, they still ended up mostly winning without him. If you didn't do that deal and you go into the season with Rob, you go into the season with Brogdon, Porzingis is still here presumably at that point, but deals with some injuries and stuff that would have probably happened the same way. Last year could have been a disaster for the Celtics, never mind a championship. Like if you don't have Holiday, Smart goes out the door, you're not really replacing him, Brogdon goes down, Rob goes down, Porzingis struggles to stay on the court. I mean, you could be talking about a second-round exit team and questions about doing the Smart trade, questions about bringing in Porzingis, and certainly a lot of questions about that team ever winning a championship. So this deal that was a stroke of luck, I don't know if you would have been able to move Brogdon otherwise for anything good at least. I don't know what Rob's value would have been to some other teams because clearly Portland liked them. Man, it always takes luck, right? But even beyond winning the championship, just their long-term situation here, they got so lucky. And obviously they had to go and do it and make what was a difficult move at the time. But wow, they got lucky with this one.
Yeah, and honestly, like one of the things that as I've been trying to understand, like how all these transactions impact each other, like the Celtics front office knew that Damian Lillard was going to get traded, and I think there weren't actually that many viable destinations as far as like trade packages that were of equal value. That Drew Holiday being on the market is not something that we were all talking about, but I think that it's something that the front office had a pretty decent sense around. So like I think it was on their radar going into the summer that could happen. Obviously, a lot of things have to line up. Drew has to be interested. The Blazers have to be willing to make a deal, and obviously the Damian Lillard trade had to happen as well. And the Bucks didn't seem to be the front runners. But you're absolutely right. I feel like we don't talk enough about how well things worked out, and it's hard to think about what would have happened. Also like you don't know that Marcus Smart would have gotten injured if he was a Celtic. Like he broke his finger, right? There was some things that kept him out for an extended period of time, but yeah, it's crazy how impactful he ended up being.
Yep. So I just want to hit on that. Both those guys getting hurt this week. Anniversary just passed in that Holiday trade. Makes you think again about what a stroke of luck it was that the Celtics were able to pull that off, and Holiday became available from moving Milwaukee and all that. So that'll do it for us here today. Next game going to be Saturday at 8, I want to say. We'll be at the Garden for that one. Celtics 76ers as the Celtics come back from Abu Dhabi today. We're going to take some time off to start this week, so we'll be at practice later this week with updates, thoughts on these games, where guys stand, and go from there. So preseason continues for the Celtics. We are brought to you by Prize Picks. Go over there. Games getting going underway right now, football games, but still some 4 o'clock games if you want to get it on to your daily fantasy teams and get them set up with some of the later players. Play $5, get $50 instantly with the code CLNS over at Prize Pick, our official daily fantasy sports partner. And Game Time, go over there, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Once again, Celtics beat the Nuggets, sweep this preseason Abu Dhabi series out there, and they are headed back to Boston to continue their training camp / preseason. And we are just, 16 days from opening night. So that's drawing a little bit closer here. Thanks for tuning in today. Thanks to Noah Dalzell for being here. You're off to Connecticut, right?
Off to Connecticut in 2 minutes. So I'll have some Connecticut Sun coverage from that WNBA game coming up too.
All right, check that out over at SBNation.com and check out Noah's You Got Boston podcast. We'll check in again midway through this week with some guests and thoughts on where the Celtics stand. And until then, this has been the Garden Report. See ya.
Wait, Amit's got an outro for us, I think.
No, he doesn't.
He said he was going to work on an outro.
He had a phenomenal game.
Phenomenal.
Forfeit's out. I think it's an option.
That did not sound like a chair.
It was a freaking chair. It does sound like a chair.